So, Collin Rountree 1-0, already with a win. Edgar with a loss. Collin starts on Aether Vial.
And this is exactly what you want to see out of the Death and Taxes deck against these blue decks, right? This is how you invalidate cards like Force of Will.
Where, yeah, that turn 1 Aether Vial. So we do want to look at the decks. We've seen some different takes on Snow decks. We saw Joe Lissette playing Bant Snow last round. He was very heavy on counter spells. When I look at Edgar's deck, it's splitting the difference between the two. He has 4 Force of Will and 2 Force of Negation, but nothing like Dovin's Veto main deck, nothing like Veil of Summer main deck. He instead has some Council's Judgments, which I figure should help in this matchup, as their removal spells. He only has 1 Supreme Verdict, however.
Right, and that's going to be a big liability here. You do need to actually check everything on the battlefield.
Additional Icefang Coatls, though that 1/1 flyer oftentimes doesn't actually trade with creatures in the Death and Taxes deck.
Well, bright side, it gets you closer to the Supreme Verdict.
That's true. It still draws the card.
Right, and one of the things that's that Rountree is going for him here is just sort of Fire and Ice is going to get it past the Coatl.
You mentioned Collin Rountree, a Grand Prix finalist with Death and Taxes, already picking up a win. Here's Mother of Runes. He's the only Death and Taxes player in the field. Now, Edgar, this deck was on his radar for the event. I believe this week, Amulet teammate Daryl Ayers, the only one on that team not in the Players' Championship, won a PTQ with Death and Taxes.
Right. It's very, very strong in the format right now.
So I'm sure he's aware of it. You know, it is the deck of one of his main testing partners. But has chosen to go towards Snow here. So I think that he would have reps in this matchup, would be my guess.
I completely agree. And you can see here, this is some serious counterplay. So we see Collin main phase activating Aether Vial, attempting to put a Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, into play, which would lock Edgar out of casting anything off of his 1 remaining land. Edgar, knowing what's about to happen, is now preempting that by firing off a Brainstorm with the Aether Vial activation still in the stack before he even sees Thalia.
Right, because once you see Thalia, it's actually too late to do anything about it.
Exactly.
2 cards back in the deck for Edgar. For removal, 4 Swords to Plowshares, 2 Council's Judgment, 1 Supreme Verdict. Outside of that, we are looking at Okos to take care of things. And I suppose if you want to count, there's a 1 main deck Brazen Borrower from Edgar that can work as removal in a pinch.
Right. There's even a point where something like Brazen Borrower is going to be great at just making Rountree act with Mother of Runes.
And you see, it is Thalia, then Stoneforge Mystic, getting Sword of Fire and Ice from Collin.
This is the setup.
Yeah. With Mother of Runes protecting all this, Edgar is more or less just looking for the Supreme Verdict, and at this point he needs 5 mana to do it. Might not even be enough.
And this is so high level. So Rountree activates this to put this Thalia in, which forced Edgar to Brainstorm, which then, because Thalia is on the battlefield now, Stoneforge Mystic was then protected from Force of Will because Edgar had tapped out.
Right.
Unbelievable.
I'm not sure what Edgar does about this situation.
No, this is a very tough battlefield to deal with.
You see Teferi Time Raveler in hand, but Mother of Runes is going to keep Edgar's whole board locked down. Even if he gets to the turn 5 Supreme Verdict, Collin will have drawn a lot of cards off Sword of Fire and Ice at that point. And we might just see a runaway from Collin Rountree.
Yeah, no, this is really bad for Edgar. He needs to just find Supreme Verdict. We're kind of... It's his 3rd turn, and he's already reaching Verdict or Bust territory.
And this is some of the advantage we see by Collin picking Death and Taxes. Edgar and a lot of these other blue players have built their decks with the mirror match in mind. We've seen main deck Dovin's Vetoes, main deck Veil of Summers, main deck Red Elemental Blasts. None of these cards play against Death and Taxes. After board, things will get better for Edgar, but game 1, there just aren't very many cards that interact here. They swing in for Collin. Just some damage now, but that Thalia is going to pick up a sword next turn. To Edgar we go. He does have the Supreme Verdict in hand.
Okay. So he just needs to hit land drops now.
Right. Still needs double white for it, and he's not there yet.
Well, this Astrolabe is going to help with that.
That's it. Even so, next he can have the Verdict as early as next turn.
That's really the first opportunity he's going to have to fire it off.
Yeah. Even then, though, a Sword of Fire and Ice will have connected once. Collin will get to pick up Thalia with Caracas, put it back down with Aether Vial. Does that even do much?
It definitely doesn't feel good, but if that's your avenue, that's your avenue.
Right. And Edgar trying to stick to basic lands as much as possible. Thanks to those Astrolabes, double white is still available. But we see Sword of Fire and Ice picked up by the Stoneforge Mystic. So here's a swing in for 7, and Collin will draw a card. Yeah, this should just force the action on Supreme Verdict.
All right, it's down to this. Does Edgar have this land drop?
Right, has to have it this turn.
Right.
Look at the hand. Didn't draw it that turn, but he may have already had it.
Well, he hasn't slammed it. I think I just see a grip of spells.
Is there any way out if that's the case? Maybe you can't jump block with Snapcaster Mage. You can jump block the Thalia, not the Stoneforge though. It's protection from blue.
You could look at maybe Elking Sword of Fire and Ice with something like an Oko.
You're always worried then that a Vial will sneak in and get those last points across. It's hard.
Yeah, no, it's just such a tight squeeze here. And there's even a point where Caracas, even if the Supreme Verdict happens, Caracas bounced the Thalia and it comes right back into play with this Aether Vial.
So 2 mana Brainstorm from Edgar. He did not hit the land drop.
And if he doesn't hit a fetch land here, he's locked.
Right. Did he find a land? He found, it looks like a stack of Force of Will. Is that all 4 of them?
Oh.
It's at least 2. Might be more. Yeah, discards 1 to hand size. Here's swinging for 7 more. And you mentioned Edgar probably Brainstorm locked here, but he drops to 2 on this attack, which means that Caracas Vial trick is lethal, which I think takes away Edgar's last out.
Right, and at this point, you play down to every last out, but this is such a tight spot.
Especially with Rashad and Port from Collin.
Oh, Supreme Verdict's off the table now.
Yeah. Here's Icevan Quaddle from Edgar. He'll draw a card. But that can't block the Sordid Stoneforge Mystic. And Collin not even porting. He's just going to let Edgar draw.
Yeah, and
there's no reason.
If Edgar doesn't have some way to actually just do anything, he's just going to go to his discard step.
Now we see that fan out. 3 more Force of Wills confirmed in Edgar's hand. And that will send us to game 2. Collin Rountree with the curve out. Is that 4? So Edgar says, yeah, I have all 4 Force of Wills. Collin, I have all 4 Swords to Plowshares.
Well, look, the way I see it is that's just a fair fight.
Everybody maxing out on their dead cards, but Collin with the correct live cards is going to be your winner here in game 1.
Yeah, generally speaking, both players having a bunch of dead cards is going to favor the person with a Sword of Fire and Ice.
Yeah, I can see how that works.
It's a simple calculus, really.
So Collin Rountree, winner here in game number 1. I do want to look at the sideboards because players have built their decks to fight the blue mirrors. They get a lot better after sideboard, and I think Edgar's deck is an example of this.
Right, so things that you're going to be looking at here, Return to Nature is pretty nice just because it can actually attack things like Aether Vial, Sword of Fire and Ice, and so on. Supreme Verdict out of the sideboard, getting another sweeper into the deck is incredibly attractive. Snapcaster Mage is going to make your Swords to Plowshares better. Palace Jailer, something else that just has a removal spell stapled to it. Edgar's going to get those, frankly, dead Force of Wills out of his deck.
Right.
A lot of his softer counter magic, especially look at Force of Negation, for example. Veil of Summer, completely text boxless here. Getting those out of the deck. You could even see Edgar reach for something like Volcanic Island if he just wants another source of mana against Rountree.
So the question I have is this enough sideboard for Edgar to contest the matchup?
I think so. A lot of these cards are actually pretty high impact if you can just answer something like Mother of Runes. So that game, it felt like Rountree just had all of the pieces that he needed in order to win. Right, Thalia kind of taxed Edgar's mana. Stoneforge Mystic was the game-winning threat that actually put the nail in the coffin. And then Mother of Runes was sort of the bottom piece of the whole puzzle. And actually being able to answer that card, if you can do that, I think Edgar has a real shot here.
when it comes to sideboard, Collin Rountree, not too much to sideboard in. His deck's pretty good game 1 here.
Yeah, I think you might see him go a little bit bigger post board. Gideon, Ally of Zendikar, pretty good. Mirran Crusader, certainly reasonable. That protection from green actually going to be coming up from Mirran Crusader. And then Cataclysm is another card that you can see that actually hits Planeswalkers.
Right. Right, it actually kills all Planeswalkers. It was printed at a time before Planeswalkers were a card type, so everybody gets to pick one card of each type to keep, except for the fact that Planeswalkers don't count.
Right, and you could see him making a case for something like Palace Jailer, just to have something that says draw a card every turn, since he's naturally going to be better at dealing combat damage. But for the most part, we saw how dominant his deck was game 1. Don't mess with the formula too much.
It's now available for pre-order at Star City Games. We have Theros Beyond Death. We've actually started to get our first peeks at cards that are from this set and some of the Planeswalkers. We saw both Ashiok and Elspeth. You can pre-order now. A special discount if you're a member of SCG Premium, $94.99. Pre-order now. StarCityGames.com/THB. We got a chance to play in some of the pre-release events with the new Planeswalkers yesterday.
Oh yeah, you and I were streaming it together. It's a really good time. The cards are sweet too. A lot of them are much better than I thought they would have been on their face.
I do like that White's getting a graveyard identity to it. That its signature Planeswalker in the set is a graveyard card. A lot of times White doesn't get to do that.
Right. There's certainly a point where one of the holes in White's color pie has historically been card advantage. So giving White some sort of mana sink is really, I feel, long overdue. Do you think it's a punt at all that they didn't, instead of THB, Theros Beyond Death should have been TBD? There's just so much joke equity there.
Oh man, and you're starting running into, we're going to have some TBD drafts.
So, who's on first?
Collin already 1 win right now with Death and Taxes. His last 2 matchups in his pod are both snow decks. Edgar playing Bant Snow. Dom Harvey is going to be his round 3 opponent, who's playing a Sultai Snow deck.
And at this point, Rountree's got to feel pretty good about his matchup. The Bant Snow deck is good at what it does, in that it has a lot of things that it can answer, but it does spin its wheels a bit using things like Arkham's Astrolabe, and the Rashadan Port Thalia deck is going to be able to capitalize on that in a big way.
Yeah, in general, the Supreme Verdict style decks actually have been good against Death and Taxes, but I actually think Death and Taxes looks pretty good right now in this metagame. Certainly Hogak is a deck, and Death and Taxes hangs with that just fine.
Right, and we saw Rountree really respecting Supreme Verdict last game, where after, turn 3, he just never actually committed anything to the battlefield.
Right. And both players on 7 here for game 2. As we're not in a blue mare, we're likely to get the full best of 3 this round. Last round it was a 1-game match between Zan Sayed and Joe Lissette.
So you're saying you think Edgar's going to win this game?
Could. I think on the play, post-board, I think he's a favorite. Yeah.
Sure.
Game 3, if it comes to that, I don't know. Those turn 1 Mother Runes really put him to the test on Swords to Plowshares.
Right, and we see Rountree with this hallmark sort of Aether Vial, turn 1 opening again.
Right.
Not as powerful post-board as it was pre-board. We saw all of those blank cards with Force in the name in Edgar's hand game 1. Those likely aren't in his library anymore.
Yeah, between Aether Vials... Yeah, just mostly with Aether Vial, you just can't count on your Force of Wills to do much work here. You might see Edgar with a couple Force of Wills still in, just because there's other cards he needs to cut first, but certainly not the full set. I would assume Force and Negation the first card to go.
Oh, yeah. Or Veil of Summer.
Yeah, those both seem worse. 2 Astrolabes for Edgar. Fixes his mana.
And this really just shows the strength of being on the play versus being on the draw. Getting able to develop these cards before Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, enters the battlefield is incredible for the Snow deck.
I was thinking exactly that. 1-mana cantrips are pretty free, especially when they fix your mana and protect you against Wasteland. 2-mana cantrips are not free at all.
No, not even close. We've seen just such the stark contrast between Once Upon a Time for 0 and Once Upon a Time for 2.
Right, this is the difference between Arkham's Astrolabe and Prophetic Prism.
Right.
For Collin, this is to start using MC from Death and Taxes, which is the no white mana play, where he starts off with Aether Vial, and then it's Mistress Factory, and then Rishadan Port. So sometimes he's actually going to plan to put all his creatures into play using Aether Vial while he uses his lands to attack and deny mana. But Edgar going to put a stop to that upkeep tapping by casting Icefang Coatl, and then gets a third Astrolabe. And so far, so good then for Edgar.
That Icefang Coatl, lot of Death Touch.
A lot of, yes.
Incredibly
6.
venomous.
I believe because he has 6 instead of 3, it has Death Touch twice.
That's just good math.
Right.
You're the math guy. I get you.
Yeah, 3 plus 3.
You wouldn't lie to me on air.
And here is Oko from Edgar. The Planeswalker entering the battlefield with plenty of Astrolabes to turn into Elk. That will be the play. One of the Astrolabes turns into a 3/3. And Edgar has to pause for a second with a Vial on 2. Are there any 2-drops he's particularly worried about here?
Well, at this point, he just doesn't really want to attack with either creature just to make sure he has the skies locked up and the ground locked up against either a flyer or a 2/1 first striker like Thalia.
Yeah, and Edgar doesn't attack.
There's no real incentive to, right? Generally, the games that Edgar wins are going to be by miles, not inches.
And we talked round 1 about macro play when we were talking about Joe Lissette and Zan Sayed. So when people talk about play skill, there's a lot of different levels of it. There's tactical play, which is really complicated turns with a lot of spells. It's kind of the find the play situation. Macro play is the what's important in this matchup? What's my game plan? And when I look at the Players' Championship field, I think Edgar is one of the players who is, in my opinion, maybe is the most impressive macro player here in the field. It's why, in these sorts of situations, you'll see that when he plays things like Amulet Titan, like Blue-White Control, which he actually plays a lot of as well. Just, the ability of, yes, I can make an Elk, rather than considering, is it safe to attack, what are the tactics, he has a really good sense of, this isn't what this is about.
Exactly.
And just starts, and you see a really good management here of that. If you were on the macro side, you see Flicker Wisp from Collin. I suppose the thing he has to worry about most is something like Cataclysm right now.
Right, and at this point, really Roundtree's trying to play catch-up a little bit here as long as Edgar can just check something like Cataclysm.
So Collin getting some card advantage. So we get Recruiter of the Guard, finds Flicker Wisp, which vials in, flickers the Recruiter, and finds Mirren Crusader.
And Mirren Crusader is the way to punch through these Elk tokens.
Right, as they are green.
Right.
Okay. Turns that Aether Vial into Elk. You can see how quickly Edgar makes that decision.
Right. At this point, he's doing what I refer to as checking boxes. He goes, all right, what are all the steps that I'm going to have to take in order to win this game? One of them is answering that Aether Vial, and this is an opportunity for him to effectively do that.
Yeah, thinking, okay, if my opponent has 8 mana worth of cards a turn, that's a way to lose. Let's make him play honest.
Exactly. This is almost 0 mana destroy your Fires of Invention.
Yeah.
Or beast within your Fires of Invention.
You see another Flicker Wisp in Collin's hand. And you wonder, there's a lot of choices to flicker here. He goes for the play. And he's going to go for the value play. Gets for the Recruiter.
And this is just him saying that he thinks this game is going to end up being a grindy one, so he's going to try and find his avenues to effectively generate just cardboard.
You see a small win for Collin. Edgar Swords to Plowshares away the recruiter, so Collin will not get the extra card, but it does mean that Edgar Swords stay 1-1.
Correct.
Now Thalia from Collin. It's going to be another Coatl from Edgar. A lot of this just feels like we're waiting around, and eventually, if Edgar's going to cast a Supreme Verdict. And when that happens, it's going to be a tough game for Collin.
Right, Edgar's just complicating the battlefield.
Trades down the board, the Coatl for a Flicker Wisp. Back to Edgar we go. Keeping pace here. Grinding out card advantage with these Coatls and Oko. And he was going to go for a plus on Oko, but it looks like Edgar might be considering swapping some cards.
At this point, giving Collin something like an Arkham's Astrolabe is effectively a non-card to Collin.
Thinks about it. Goes back to the board. It's going to be another blocker. It's an Elk. There's more boxes we're checking here. Flyers are lined up to trade. Ground creatures are lined up to trade. Oko being a source of 3/3s here. And then a main phase, Swords to Plowshares. Edgar, respecting Caracas, decides to get rid of the legendary creature while he can.
Right, and this is exactly what we were talking about during the sideboarding portion, and honestly in our pregame show as well, is even though the cards from Death and Taxes line up quite well against Oko, we've seen with Mirran Crusader, for example, there are a lot of times where your cards that line up well against Oko just get checked by Swords to Plowshares.
And Collin does have the Cataclysm. So something he can fire off. Now, unfortunately for Collin, that Aether Vial was elked. And that was a pretty big deal when it comes to Cataclysm.
Right. There are ways you can end up trying to come out ahead with it. So you animate your Misha's Factory and choose it for your artifact.
Okay.
And then say Caracas as your land, your elk is the creature, and so on.
So you lose 4 cards and Edgar loses a lot more.
Several. We're talking multiple cards here.
Right. Do you think Edgar has any counter spells left?
If he does, it's a low number. I would lean towards no.
Yeah. Looking at that Cataclysm, it's just got to be the play. He doesn't see himself winning the game in any other way. The longer he waits, the more likely it is Edgar has a counter spell.
Exactly. That card's not getting more likely to resolve.
Right. And it's already good enough at this point to cast.
Right. There's certainly a point where the temptation is there to get incredibly greedy.
And here's the play you talked about, activating Factory and then casting Cataclysm. This will allow him to keep 4 of his permanents. So Cataclysm. Each player chooses from their own permanents an artifact, creature, enchantment, and land. Or they would, except Edgar did have one of the Force of Wills.
And, that's just kind of a symptom of decklist being open. Edgar knew that was a card that was good against him, and this is a box that he had to make sure he could check.
Yeah, and it's a 1 of 2, so he was holding on to that counter spell for this card specifically.
And now Rountree's got his work cut out for him because he actually just has to catch up on the table the hard way.
Back to Edgar we go. He makes a food token. And you see him picking up his step a little bit. He knows that counterspell was a turning point in the game.
Right. At this point, if you're in Edgar's seat, you likely feel like you have won the game. It's just a matter of actually closing the door.
Right. Yeah, Oko, the play patterns of Oko, even though Oko makes 3/3s and oftentimes can win games, it's usually not correct to try to win games with Oko. It's more correct just to sit around and make an army and kind of get a million loyalty planeswalker.
Right. There's this old joke where basically you don't have to try to win. You'll get around to it.
So Sanctum Prelate on 5, that covers Force of Will, and then we see Mirran Crusader. I like this from Collin. He's showing no respect for Supreme Verdict because he can't beat it anyway.
Right.
It says, well, I'll win if you don't have it and lose if you have it. Now, bad news for Collin. Edgar does have it, but I actually really like the play.
Yeah, sometimes they just have it, and, if Rountree's not winning the game anyway, find out sooner.
Yeah, don't play around cards you can't beat. I do see the Supreme Verdict to the front of Edgar's hand. It feels like... Is it time, then?
Let's see if he attacks. That'll tell us.
A swing of a 1/1. Feels like it's about to happen.
Oh, yeah.
And Collin knows it, too. You see he blocks with the Flicker Wisp. He needs to keep enough creatures on the board so that Edgar still pulls the trigger, but in this situation, he did.
Right.
Yeah, you see Collins, he takes this...
Are we...
Yeah, are we doing this? Yeah,
on.
all right. Yes, we are. Supreme Verdict from Edgar. Board is clear. Collin still has a Factory as a land.
Right, and it's possible if Collin has something like Council's Judgment in his deck that if he finds that card, this battlefield is not that far from parity.
Yeah, it's just Oko.
Right.
Yeah, and he has some lands to work with. He has Palace Jailer here in hand.
That is an attractive one.
Yeah, he can jail the Elk. He gets to draw a card. Now, the Astrolabe is going to attack him back. There's still work to be done.
Well, luckily, one of the nice things is that Factory can animate and pump itself to trade with the Arkham's Astrolabe if Edgar were to take that line, which lets Rountree remain the Monarch.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like he has to make this play. And goes for the Jailer. Just 2 cards in Edgar's hand. Elk is gone. It's not coming back even if Edgar becomes the Monarch. And Council's Judgment.
Whoa.
Okay, this is a good 1-2 from Collin. It's going to be... Edgar will be hard-pressed to become a Monarch here.
That's a good pair of last cards. Oh, my goodness.
Edgar has land and Council's Judgment in hand, which would normally be good, except Collin's drawing 2 cards a turn. And this is a problem for Rountree. Or rather for Edgar. He doesn't have a way to become the Monarch. He doesn't have a way to keep up on cards either.
What a turnaround.
Yeah, okay. This was the other play. On your side, does he have an Oko? He does find an Oko.
Oh,
this
my
is big.
gosh.
Okay. I mean, Collin has to chump block, right?
Right. No, that's how you stay in this game.
Oh, he doesn't have a chance. Here is Swords to Plowshares. Edgar, you saw the calm on his face there. Yeah, it wasn't a Palace Jailer.
Oh.
Yeah, that Monarch token looks great. I would sure like to have one. Edgar has a Monarch token now.
As a matter of fact, you should see me in a crown.
So they're going to trade this back and forth for a bit, but that does not favor Collin. You know, if Mishra's Factories attack here, and Collin can become the Monarch again. Ports the fetch land.
Big fan of this play.
Okay, so that's Coatl he's respecting?
Right, and depending on when he did that, it even could create a situation where, Edgar can't get a basic Plains with it, which would then allow Rountree to wasteland it to play around Swords to Plowshares.
Okay, so Collin attacks, becomes the Monarch, and then casts Phyrexian Revoker, naming Oko. And Mother of Runes as his last card. Okay, there's still some play here.
This is a chance to just lock the game up right now.
Well, Edgar can attack, and then Collin likely has to chump block with Mother of Runes? Or is he just
Or you can just let Edgar have the card.
Okay, let him have the card
Is
and
a
then take
random
it back.
card better than a Mother of Runes?
Probably not.
Yeah.
To just take the 3. Supreme Verdict drawn by Edgar, but that creature land makes this complicated. He can become the Monarch and then sweep the board, which would generally be a pretty good play.
Right, that's not a bad one if you were to say, sweep the battlefield, attack with your 3/3, sweep the battlefield, make a food.
Look at the speed there. Collin immediately chump blocks with Mother of Runes.
Okay. And this is sort of Collin saying, I know you have removal in your deck.
Yeah.
This is worth more this way.
Edgar's hand, Supreme Verdict, and Council's Judgment. Both available, but Collin is the Monarch. Gestures Council Judgment the Revoker anyway. Yeah, he wants that Oko to be online. So, Mother of Runes gone, Revoker gone, Oko goes back to make some food, land by Edgar and pass, but Collin stays the Monarch.
This is big for Collin here.
Yeah, now the question is whether he can hold on to it, right? Because Edgar gets 2 attackers next turn.
Right, this game is close.
Wasteland on the duel.
Oh, are those just lands in hand?
One of them is another Wasteland. The other one, we'll see in a second here. I think it's a spell. No, it is not. It's a port. It was 2 lands. Collin draws the card, but Edgar gets a chance to try to become the Monarch here. See some Rishadan Port upkeeps from Collin. Brings Edgar down to 4 mana. But he wants that Monarch token. So swing in for 6. Collin cannot stop this. He could trade with one of them, but I don't even think he wants to do that.
Yeah, I'm not super confident on that. That's your avenue to actually get the Monarch token back.
Right. And then Edgar says go. He draws a card. Back to Collin. Mother of Runes is the draw. You just think he has to, even though it's 2 damage for 6 damage, Collin has to keep making these trades. He can't let Edgar hold on to the Monarch. Now, Sword of Fire and Ice picked up from Collin.
That's a big one.
Yeah, Edgar has already spent his Council's Judgment. So here's the creature. He does have enough mana to do everything. Cast Sword, Equip Sword, Animate. It's all his mana.
Right, and he has another land in his hand, so he could even cast the Mother of Runes after all that's said and done.
Right, it's lined up for him.
Oh, but now he's actually starting to run the risk if he just casts Mother of Runes.
Oh, no, Edgar's
what if
gonna
Edgar
take it?
steals it?
Ooh, okay.
That's a tough game to win.
Yeah, because then the elk that's not stolen becomes a 5/5.
Right.
And it starts mowing down your creatures. Yeah, you actually just can't do that, can you? He's thinking about it. Here's the sword. It's a post-combat sword.
As a control player, that's probably top 5 favorite kinds of swords.
Yeah. What do you make of playing it post-combat and not going for the equip?
Here it just basically signals that he's planning to do other things with his mana.
Okay, he wants the sword on the Mother of Runes.
This is what protects it from getting stolen by Oko.
Draws the card, but doesn't protect the sword from getting stolen.
Well, so Edgar would have to elk it first, which gives Rountree a blocker.
Okay. Brainstorm from Edgar. Collin did become the Monarch again. 16 to 11 on life totals.
It's so rare you see people just trade being the Monarch this much and say,
Right.
No. I will draw a card.
And normally someone runs away with it by this point.
Look at me. I'm the Monarch now.
It's like Game of Thrones going on here. Palace Jailer from Edgar's
Hey,
side.
that's one way to become the Monarch.
The bloodless coup, if you will.
Well, it looks like we have a red wedding coming up with all of this.
Yeah, this might be Edgar pulling away.
Yeah. Yeah, Rountree, with the Cataclysm gone, it's hard to imagine him having any sort of real catch-up from this spot.
Yeah, draw there was a Plains. That the Palace Jailer really is the top end of the Death and Taxes deck when it tries to win these grindy games, and I think we've gotten to the point where that's not good enough anymore. And yep, Collin, good recognition. He knows it, says, well, draw some extra cards, and we are on to a third game.
This game took a while. Next one might take a while. Let's make sure I have time to actually win this game.
Right. Some great back and forth there. We saw kind of the way that Edgar tries to manage these creatures. It's a mix of Oko and Supreme Verdict.
Yeah, you gotta like what Edgar has going on here. But now that now that the play's going to shift back to Rountree, I'm a little worried about the amount of cantrips that Edgar has,
Right.
and the fact that Rountree's going to get to develop something like Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, before Edgar has a chance to develop all of his Astrolabes, Ponders, and so forth.
And I agree. I agree with that. There's some higher impact plays Collin can do. He has more opportunities to hold Edgar's feet to the fire. I mean, that game we also had a Cataclysm that Force of Will checked Edgar, and Edgar's not going to pass that check every time.
Exactly.
So now, you can check him on a turn 1 Mother of Runes. You can check him on a turn 2 Thalia into a cantrip board. You can check him on Cataclysm. Edgar, if he can pass all the checks, maybe we see a repeat of game 2.
Yeah,
but it's harder to do.
It's entirely possible, right? The Quaddle, very good card against creature decks. There are a lot of things that it doesn't necessarily line up the best against, but what can feel like Doomblade draw a card is going to be very strong. So there's a lot to like about Edgar's deck here.
For Edgar, Magalhaes, one part of Team Amulet. He is also some of the Canadians here, both him and Dominic Harvey, coming from the Toronto area. This was really his first big year on the SCG Tour, playing 19 Opens and top 8ing 7 of them. I mean, in team events, the team of Edgar, Daryl Ayers, and Matthew Dilks were basically unstoppable.
Oh, absolutely. They top 8'd how many in a row?
Right. Edgar actually still, though, interesting thing, doesn't have an open win.
No, but, I think I'm going to say higher than 30% conversion rate into top 8.
It's not bad.
No, not in the slightest. Lots of great stuff from him all year.
See here, in the team events, he, for his team, was the standard player for every event that season.
Yeah, and he's just kind of been really far ahead of the game in all of the resource-heavy standard metagames we've seen in the last few months. The green-based ones in particular, he was one of the big proponents of the Scapeshift deck before it was even on people's radar.
I was going to say, the fact that Eldraine being the green cards being so good, I mean, not just Eldraine, but even before that, green being good this last year has just been great news for Edgar.
Right, you can tell he's been putting the work in to stay what feels like a week ahead of the metagame, and looking at that, the praise you gave to his macro reads, I just really like what he's been able to do.
And we have 7s here for our third game. Collin off to a turn 1 Aether Vial start again here.
3 for 3?
3 for 3. Edgar gets one of those cantrips down.
Ooh, it's the artifact mirror.
Yeah. Well, actually, we mentioned, though, he needs to get these cantrips down before a turn 2 Thalia. Oh, and by the way, Collin definitely has one of those.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You see, actually, though, rather than making it, he's going to go for a second Aether Vial off a Wasteland. So Edgar with one more chance at cantrips, and he will take that opportunity while it's there.
Right, and this is Rountree identifying that he's less likely to just punk Edgar out like he did in the first game, right?
Okay.
Edgar's deck is better equipped to actually fight what Death and Taxes is doing, so you would rather develop Thalia when you have this Caracas untapped so you can protect Thalia from something like a Swords to Plowshares.
Yeah, 2 copies of Aether Vial means that Collin gets to fully maximize his utility lands. Is there much worry about Edgar being able to blow up all these Aether Vials?
So that's a spot where Edgar is generally going to pick whether he wants to deal with creatures or Aether Vials. Something like Oko has the benefit of attacking both once Edgar feels like he's stabilized a bit, but a lot of the time Edgar's going to need to prioritize going after Rountree's creatures rather than things like Aether Vial.
And I do want to praise Edgar's hand here for a second, because this is... So in the hand, we had another Astrolabe here. We have Icefang Coatl on 2, Oko on 3, and 2 copies of Supreme Verdict. If there's... Okay, I get that Collin is firing on all cylinders here with these 2 Aether Vials and the Thalia, but he is not the only one.
Right, he's really going to want to find something like Recruiter of the Guard to get the Flicker Wisp chain started.
Yeah, and because there's the double Supreme Verdict and Oko on Edgar's side, this Mother of Runes I don't actually think is as threatening as it normally would be.
No, not at all.
Yeah, Edgar says, that's fine. That's just a free card for my Verdict to mop up.
Exactly. Spot removal is not really Edgar's plan here.
And now we get Thalia off an Aether Vial. See, Collin does not want it to get hit by any sort of counterspell. Caracas is there to protect as well. Looks like Mirren Crusader, land, and then one more there in Collins's hand.
Looks like Collin trying to decide if he wanted to play Mirren Crusader there.
Back to Edgar we go. Now the question is, does he have lands? It starts with a 2-mana Ponder. You see him actually skipping over Icefang Coatl there.
The idea here is he just wants to actually just maximize the odds that he hits those lands, right? If you Icefang Coatl and Brick, Coatl does not line up well against Athalia.
It's all about hitting land drops. Edgar already has the spells he needs to win the matchup.
Exactly.
And one of the difficulties, because Collin has kept a double Aether Vial hand, he is lighter on cards that actually do something.
Mm-hmm.
You pay a price for this mana.
Right. That is effectively just each of those is a land when you're evaluating your opening hand, especially when you see multiples.
Swing here for 2 with Thalia. Now with Thalia, Aether Vials, and Mother of Runes, it's going to be hard for Edgar to remove this board in any meaningful way.
Right.
And here's an interesting one. Did you see there, back to basics in Edgar's deck has been brought in out of the sideboard?
Right, and a lot of that is trying to attack the utility lands. We saw the strength of those last game when that Mishra's Factory was able to kind of keep Rountree in the game forever because of that Monarch emblem.
And that's true. I mean, Caracas actually is doing a lot of work here.
Absolutely.
3 mana Council's Judgment from Edgar. Protection does not save you from this card. This will just get its target.
Right, this is one where you likely have to bounce the Thalia preemptively.
Right, so this is nice if you're unaware of this interaction. How it works is, once it gets time, Edgar does not pick a target. It's a voting on a resolution. So you can't bounce the creature in response. So Collin has to bounce the Thalia before Council's Judgment, and then when it resolves, Edgar can pick something else.
And how do you like this? Mirren Crusader coming in on the end step now that Rountree knows the coast is clear.
Yeah, and I like this. The coast is clear. This will probably get a Supreme Verdict out of Edgar's hand.
If Edgar hits another land.
Yeah, Force of Will, pitching Icefang Coatl on the Thalia. I love this.
Oh, this means he doesn't even need to hit the land.
And the Caracas doesn't play here. Edgar has done really well this game. He's going to take 4, but the cleanup crew's coming.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You see Edgar starting to flick his cards faster.
Yeah.
He knows this verdict's about to happen.
2 for 1. It's a great board for it.
Oh, yeah. Mirren Crusader's one of the more difficult cards to answer without something like a Swords to Plowshares.
Let's talk about the fact that to set up for all of this, Edgar Council's Judgmented the vial that was on 2.
Right. He knew. This is sort of him saying, maybe if I don't hit the land, this is how I can mitigate that.
Yeah. 2 mana, and this is going to be Coatl anyway. He's going to take another turn off. He doesn't feel the need to verdict yet.
Okay.
Do you think he's trying to get more cards out of Collin?
Yeah, at this point he may just say, all right, well, your Mirren Crusader isn't actually dealing enough damage on its own.
Well, what if it brings a friend? Okay. Maybe Edgar, this should get the Supreme Verdict. I mean, what he'd hate to see is land sort of Fire and Ice.
Oh, yeah, that would just be lights out.
He goes to 3. And now, honestly, Aether Vial on 3 becomes really scary.
If Collin just has another land, that's Walking Ballista.
That's walking. Is that Ballista in his hand?
He has a Ballista in his hand. Recruiter of the Guard can grab it.
We see Brazen Borrower goes on an adventure to bounce. It looks like the Aether Vial. Is that right?
I'd imagine that's the target here, especially if you're trying to pave the way for a nice Supreme Verdict.
It's really, I mean, this is it's some aggression on Edgar's side. The fact that he didn't Brazen Borrower away one of these Mirren Crusaders, that he might get punished here on the Ballista, because we do think, right, that Collin might be able to win off this if he draws a land.
Right, and the big issue here is likely just that if you were to bounce the Mirren Crusader, then Vial just puts it back in.
Right. All right, so back to Edgar we go. He needs to gain life, though, right? He can cast the Supreme Verdict, and that's good and all. And he actually has an Oko in his hand. So Collin needs to get the land this turn, because otherwise Edgar, Oko can make a food. Does Collin do it?
All right, let's see it.
Does he have the land? It's a miss.
It's Sanctum Prelate off the top. So this is not a complete loss, right? Collin can just put Ballista on 2.
Right, and that forces Edgar to win Ballista on 2, says if I untap, I get 4 mana, game over.
Right.
Now, the danger on Collin's side, what he has to think about is if he does that, then suddenly Swords to Plowshare starts doing things.
That's true.
So he's going to do Sanctum Prelate on 3. That stops Oko. That's actually...
This is heads up.
That's the right number. Edgar has another Supreme Verdict. I mean, he has to answer this immediately. Ponder.
Pondering is not free if he doesn't have a land here.
No. I mean, he can... No, he can't. I was going to say he can cast Oko, but he can't. Yeah, you feel like maybe he was just supposed to cast the Supreme Verdicts in his hand?
Yeah, and, he also can't cast Council's Judgment if he finds a copy of that.
Right, it's a 3. So Swords to Plowshares is really the only removal spell he has here. He has, I was going to say Teferi Time Raveler, but that, again, does not work. Snapcaster Mage. He has Brazen Borrower as a blocker.
No, because that only blocks flyers.
That only blocks flyers. Yes. All right. So he passes. Go to combat. This is... I mean, Collin has...
Oh, is this an up in response to the Aether Vial?
But I think Edgar's dead. Edgar's dead
This is
here. He
it?
blows up the vial. The ballista's going to kill him.
Does he have swords?
Goes to 1. Okay, swords on the Prelate. Did Collin draw the land, though?
Land?
That's the question. So now Collin goes to 21. I mean, Edgar is still hanging on. Does he have it? No. Ballista... Gideon, ally of Zendikar.
That's fine. That's a big one.
Yeah, that will work.
Sure.
It makes a 2/2. That's a great draw. It's not as good of a draw as a land, but it's pretty close.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Now the Supreme Verdict won't do it from Edgar. Gideon can +1.
You think Bitter Blossom's a good one?
Yeah, this one's better. And I don't know that the Planeswalker might just be too much. You see Brainstorm, Oko. Yeah, he wanted to make a room for this Oko, which makes sense, except Oko's not good enough anymore.
Right.
He needs Council's Judgment for the Gideon and then an answer to the Night token. He doesn't know that he needs an answer to the Night token, but he does.
Yeah, no, this is tough. How does he get out of this?
Astrolabe. And Oko. I don't think that does it.
All right. No, I think
I think Collin has it, and he knows he has it. He pluses the Gideon, swings the team, casts the Ballista, and there's the land. He makes the Ballista, and that will be 2-0 for Collin Rountree. And that was a game 3 that it felt like he might not... Wasn't clear that Collin was going to get it.